They hate me. I'm a troublemaker. I had to be willing to risk losing my job in order to get the rights that my contract says that were owed to me. And that was very scary. That was very scary when you're going up against UPS managers, you're going up against your union. But the reason why that happened to me that way is because my heart just tells me I was female.
Hello, my name is Teddy Ostrow. Welcome to the Upsurge, a podcast about UPS, the Teamsters, and the future of the American labor movement. The Upsurge is produced in partnership with In These Times and the Real News Network. Both are nonprofit media organizations that cover the labor movement closely. Check them out at inthesetimes.com and therealnews.com. where you can also find an archive of all our past episodes. You are listening to what would normally be an exclusive bonus episode of the Upsurge, exclusive to our Patreon supporters, as well as Teamsters who freely receive bonus content. And if you're a Teamster who hasn't received the free RSS link, let me know. But we've made this episode free to the public to show you the excellent content you're missing if you are not a Patreon supporter. These bonus episodes are more quickly made, getting out interviews and even some on-the-ground reporting to our patrons. And we are currently in a patron drive to get 200 monthly supporters of the show by July. We are a long ways away. We currently have 65 wonderful patrons. Thank you to those patrons, really. But we are not sustainable. We need your help to keep the show going, to continue reporting and educating on one of the most important labor fights of this generation. And we especially need to be sustainable as the fight ramps up. July 31st, folks, TikTok. If you appreciate the show and you've got some extra money to share, and could even be $5 a month, please head over to patreon.com/upsurgepod. You can find the link in the description. 200 monthly supporters. Please grab a friend, grab your grandma, bug your union rep, whoever. Let's make this happen. And remember, the next 26 people who become supporters of our Patreon will get a free 1-year subscription to In These Times magazine. Many of you haven't responded to my request on Patreon for your address to claim that offer. So if you don't do that soon, we may have to give it to someone else. So please claim it. On to the show. For this episode, I interviewed Michelle Espinoza, a semi-truck driver or feeder driver in UPS parlance, out of Teamsters Local 135 in Indianapolis. You may remember the story of Local 135 from episode 3. That is the local where rank and file pushed for leadership change with the help of Teamsters for a Democratic Union. It's an inspiring story, and you should go back and listen to it if you like. But I spoke to Michelle because of her experience and organizing as a woman at UPS. As you might imagine, UPS is a male-dominated corporation, both on the corporate side and on the union worker side. And like across all institutions of our society, there are structural obstacles, challenges, prejudice, issues that women uniquely face at UPS. You could say the same thing about non-white and particularly black UPSers, as well as LGBTQ plus UPSers. There is a long history of women organizing at UPS that we can't fully cover here. I'll throw some links in the show notes that you should definitely check out, and that includes the group Upsurge. Yes, Upsurge, which was a largely women-led militant group in the 1970s, pushing for a fair contract at UPS, members of which eventually merged into the movement we all now know, Teamsters for a Democratic Union. And also, I will include some links about some high-profile issues women, particularly pregnant women, have faced at UPS. One such legal case even reached the Supreme Court. But this episode focuses on Michelle's unique, but also not so unique experience as a black woman at the company. And that includes what she's doing to organize and educate other women in the workplace. Heads up, the sound quality on this episode, particularly on my end, is not so great. We had technical issues and had to do the interview by phone, but thankfully, Michelle sounds a lot better than me, so please bear with us.
Michelle Espinoza, welcome to the Upsurge.
Hi, Teddy. Thank you for having me.
Michelle, I think the first thing to cover is, about you. I'd love to hear you introduce yourself. How'd you come to UPS? What you do there? How long you've been there? You're local. Those kinds of things.
Michelle Espinoza is my name. I have been with UPS for 8 years now. I'm currently a feeder driver, which means I drive the semi-trucks. Prior to that, I did package car driving, and prior to that, I worked in the hub at one of our local UPS facilities. It was a huge career change for me. I came from the hotel and retail management industry. So for many, 8-9 years in, I'm still pretty new to the game because a lot of UPSers are 25, 30-year employees, but kind of got baptized by fire, got my feet wet quick, and here I am.
So as I understand it, you, your husband, and your son maybe occasionally, all of you guys work at UPS. You're like a UPS family.
We are a UPS family, and it's my husband, myself, and we have 2 daughters that are also UPSers. We don't have our son is not a UPSer at this time, not yet, but we have 2 daughters. One is a feeder driver along with us, which means she drives the semis as well. My husband is a feeder driver as well, and we have a daughter that works inside of one of our main hubs here in Indianapolis.
Wow, really a family affair full of Teamsters. That's so cool.
Yes, we are.
The last time we talked, I gave you a call, or I approached you initially at the TDU convention in Chicago because I heard you, speak before like hundreds of people. You responded to Sean O'Brien. You posed a question directly mentioning some of the issues that specifically women at UPS were dealing with. And then we talked and you kind of walked me through your journey at UPS and the obstacles you were forced to navigate because of your gender, your identity. And, I want to get into your specific story, but first, maybe we could start a little generally. What are the differences between being a woman at UPS and, as you perceive it, being, like a cis male navigating the company? What are the specific gendered issues that women are having at the company?
Sure. And these are my opinions, but I also gather information like this from other UPS women. I have a Facebook group of, I think we've reached about 8,500 women at this point. So it's my experience and information that I get from them, from their questions about working at UPS. So some of the things that I've had to deal with working in a smaller hub initially, it was all men except for 3 women, drivers anyway. But as you're going through a small hub like that and it's majority male, you can only imagine, some of the male type of comments that may come past a female. Anything that you can think about, probably it gets said to you, and they like to pass it off as joking. But after a while, if you don't develop tough enough skin, it can really get to you and tear you down. So dealing with things like that, we have a lot of the women deal with pregnancy issues, breastfeeding issues, how to navigate, how to cope, where, when. And we have women in all facets of UPS careers, whether they're working in the hub, whether they're driving a package car, delivering packages to your home, or being what I do, drive the semi-trucks. It's all women doing all jobs, but we have to carry the mother type of responsibilities when we return to work. So we hear a lot of different stories that women go through, even down to, how a woman should dress working inside the hub. Even the women can get into a debate about what is acceptable. So we have to navigate carefully. We have a few more landmines that we have to avoid that the men don't, but we just kind of try to stick together and help answer each other's questions so that we can get through it.
And is it pretty rare for women to hold, like, specifically the feeder driver position, which, as I understand it, it's one of the top positions at UPS. one of the better paid, and it takes a long time to get there generally. So you've only been the company for 8-9 years, you said. Is that fast to get there in general, or can you tell me a bit about who works what job as far as you understand?
Being a woman in UPS period, whatever your job is, you're going to be the minority. The feeder department is the top of the line job that you could have for UPS. And depending on your location, what area you are in within UPS, it could take in our area 10 years or more to start in the hub and make your way up into the feeder department. My daughter's path was much quicker because the demand for semi-drivers is so great. I think all across the country, we're experiencing a demand for semi-drivers, but right here in our Indianapolis area, our buildings, our workload had doubled or tripled. And our feeder department for years maybe was at a 200, 250 board. When I came in that year, the number of drivers they hired, we doubled the board. So we are now sitting at a little over 600, on our way to 700. And like I said, I've just been in the feeder department for 5 years now, 6 years. Before that, I worked, in package car in the hub, so that would make my total 8 years. My daughter, she came in, it would have been, if this is 23, she is about to complete progression, so that's 5 years. So what would that be, 2019? She started as a seasonal worker. She got hired in January, February of 2020. I believe that would be right. I can't remember exactly. But as soon as she got hired in, she was able to come into feeder 6 months later. And that is normally unheard of, but because of the need for drivers, that was her story. She was able to move much quicker to get into this high-paying job.
Wow, yeah, I've never heard of anything like that. And even hearing your story before, getting into feeder drivers that quick, that's pretty incredible. But you told me that it wasn't such an it might be it was fast, but it wasn't such an easy journey. Maybe you could bring us through your journey at UPS. And as I understand, throughout your time you had to file grievances, you fought the company, you fought the previous administration of your local union. Let's start maybe at the beginning of when you tried to sort of rise the ranks and you started seeing obstacles, and what you did about that. So maybe we can start with when you were in the hub, maybe trying to become a package car driver or wherever you want to start.
Okay. When I started in the hub here in Indianapolis, I was at a very small hub. They're smaller hubs, but they called our hub the country club. Because it was so small and full of men, and they had everything situated the way that they like it. I came in as a seasonal worker. I got hired on, seasonal meaning Christmas time. I came in just as a Christmas helper, where I would ride with a driver that delivered packages to homes, and I would hop out, deliver a few at homes, and hop back in. He'd drive a little bit, he'd give me some more, I'd jump out, run the packages to the door, scan them, ring the doorbell, and then jump back in. That was what my seasonal work as a helper looked like. At the completion of that season, I got hired on, it's called permanent part-time in the hub. So I started off, when the semis would pull in, I was unloading and loading those semis with the packages. And then as you progress, you move into loading the package cars or unloading the package cars. I did that for a little while, and then I was able to qualify for what they call, I think it's a premium hub job, where I moved into small sort is what they call it, where packages you can kind of hold with one hand or two hands that are smaller. I was moving those through the building, putting them in bags and sending them on their way so that they can get loaded into trucks and so forth. And then I start getting word that my building was needing to hire an early AM, which is early morning, delivery person to get packages that had to be out before 9 a.m. delivered. So I thought I would be interested in that. So I signed the list to do EAM. That was the first fight, because what I didn't realize, Teddy, was I was taking that EAM, that early morning work, from the head union steward at the building. And what that meant for him would be, if he came in early to do those early deliveries, he got paid time and a half to do that. And it's a significant amount of money with what they make. And he had been doing it, I don't know, Teddy, probably 3 years maybe at this point. So even though I had been awarded the job, it took 3-4 months for me to fight to get to actually do the job. And mind you, it's a pay increase when you move into something like that. But because that was his money I was basically taking, I had to fight him and my union hall to actually get the job and start doing it. I had to make phone calls to corporate people with UPS waving the flag saying, hey, I got the bid. It says I should have been able to start within 30 days. Help me. So finally I got that. Okay. Well, then they liked me delivering those little quick packages. And so then the opportunity came to become a part-time delivery person in their hub, which I would work in the hub part of the day and then deliver another part of the day. Or if there was somebody that they needed me to cover their run, then, I wanted to be able to do that. So that's when we get into, if you want to be more like a part-time or going into full-time package car driver for us, you're going to have to go to Intergrad. This is where it starts to get fun. Intergrad is like package car, UPS driver boot camp. It had been around. No one in that building had ever been required to go to Intergrad. But when I come along and sign the list that I want to become one of your regular package car drivers, guess who has to go to UPS boot camp? So even getting the opportunity to get to the boot camp, even though no one else had to do it, I had to fight for that too. They tried their best to put a couple other men in front of me that they thought should want that job and should go to the Intergrad. Well, none of them were able to make it. One guy who was supposed to go with me, we were supposed to meet at the airport to fly to Chicago to do the Intergrad. He didn't show up. He chickened out and backed out at the last minute. So from my hub, I was the only person going to this Intergrad or package car delivery boot camp. So I went, and they had bets, literal money bets against me that I wouldn't pass. I did. And so I come back, and instead of crediting me the time I had already spent delivering their packages for them, after boot camp, they wanted to put me through the 30-day training period with them. So now I had to go through another training period and pass their requirements. And during that means they give you a certain route. You have to run it you have to run so many packages in so many hours of the day, called make scratch. And they didn't think I would be able to do that either. Honestly, Teddy, I didn't think I was going to be able to do it. I was scared to death every day for 30 days, wondering if I'm going to get into a small accident or if I'm going to be able to make scratch. Well, every time they gave me my route, every day for 30 days, Teddy, I made scratch.
Now, when you say that they were making bets, who was making bets? Is this other people at your hub, union stewards, or who were making bets on you?
Drivers at the hub, other drivers.
And normally they don't have to go to this sort of boot camp. And when I say they, I mean normally the male drivers don't normally have to go. And then after that, this 30-day trial period, is that also normal for people to have to do?
Well, being that I had passed Intergrad, I didn't, and I had already been driving for them. I didn't think they would make me do it again, but they did. So after all of that with package car, I became a full-time package car driver, and once I have my sights set on something, then they're set. After I became a package car driver, I heard that the possibility of me going into the feeder department might actually be possible because they were going to be putting the annual list up for anybody that's interested in becoming a feeder driver. Well, I found out the lists had gone up at a big hub and a smaller hub, but it didn't come to my building. But per our contract, it says it was supposed to come to our building. Well, they said to me, because remember what I call this place, it's the country club. They have everything set the way they want to have it set. They had worked it out somewhere prior to me that the list doesn't come to that building only if they don't get the drivers that they need from the other two buildings. The contract said when it goes up at the other two buildings, it's simultaneously supposed to go up at our building as well. That was my first grievance. You violated the contract because you didn't post it the exact same time that you posted the others. Someone with lower seniority than me may be having the opportunity to go into feeders, and I haven't even been able to find the list. That's my first grievance. Well, didn't take too much for that grievance to get a win. I don't even know if the grievance even had to be heard because our human resources department actually agreed with me and said we just never had put it up over there basically because they didn't want it. They didn't want to lose any of their package car drivers to feeders, so the list just had never gone up there. And HR agreed that's not acceptable. We're going to go ahead and put it up because you're right. Contract says it's supposed to be up. So the list goes up. Well, this is what I start hearing from now we're talking managers. Well, there's a pecking order. You'll never make it. You know, here, you actually can use my pen and sign it, but I can guarantee you won't get the call. Okay. Thank you for your pen, sir. I'm going to go ahead and sign it. And I signed it. And there were specific requirements that said you have to have your permit by the such and such date. When we call you, you need to be ready to go to the class and so forth. Well, when that date came and gone, the list came down. I was the only one that had her permit and was ready to go. They did not let me go. They said, we need to give these other 4 men in front of you a chance to get their permit to see if they can qualify to go into feeders. That's where the next grievance was filed, NLRB charges were filed, and EEOC charges were filed because it was very clear what the bid sheet said the requirements were. I was the only one to have it. And they started giving these men extra time to get the credentials they should have had. Well, they even let 2 guys were able to get the credentials. One, unfortunately, ended up not going into feeders because he had to go to prison. Poor guy. The other guy got over into feeders. His first week, he has a horrible accident and tears down electricity in a small community. Well, then guess who they're looking at again? Me. I get my chance to go into feeders. I pass first round to get my CDL, and I've never had to look back. But to be able to get that chance while I was filing those NLRB, EEOC charges, the union hall's angry at me. Union stewards at the old building, at the new building, they hate me. I'm a troublemaker. I had to be willing to risk losing my job in order to get the rights that my contract says that were owed to me. And that was very scary. That was very scary when you're going up against UPS managers, you're going up against your union. But the reason why that happened to me that way is because my heart just tells me I was female. EEOC definitely was interested in the case, and NLRB was too. And the reason what ended up happening with my union hall, the old leadership, I got a phone call from one of the top leaders and said, "Darling," that was his favorite word to call me, "Darling, if you pull those labor charges back, I know I can get you into that next class." And I said, "Sir, get me into the next class, and once I get into feeders, I'll pull them." And that's what I did. And that's how I got into feeders.
Wow. Yeah, it's incredible how you had to navigate both issues and resistance from your union as well as the company. How did that make you feel? I mean, I'm curious, how did you have to navigate both the company, the union? Were you being strategic? Was it hard to kind of, not just lose it at people who are clearly trying to just stop you from getting what you deserve?
It was like my adrenaline. I can feel it right now, Teddy, just remembering it all. I can feel my voice kind of shake. It was one of the most frustrating and agitating and belittling events that I've ever had happen to me. I would go into work every day. I would keep my head up. I knew I was right and just trying to hold my chest up. But then when I would come home, I would pretty much collapse in tears. And I would cry to my husband. We pull out our union books, pull out paperwork, pulling up the internet, looking at information, reading everything we could read to know what's the next thing to do. And it was scary because you know you have to pull these levers, but you know you're going to upset people that could affect your job. They could find a reason to fire you, and because your union is angry with you for filing charges against them, they could find reasons to not help you get your job back. So I had to tell myself, I got to risk it all in order to win it all. And that's scary. And a lot of people can't do that. But because I had my husband and he was our provider, I could play that game a little bit more to the lever in order to get what I knew I deserved. So it was very, very hard. It was excruciating at times. It got to a point where I would be on the phone with a union leader, and I'm cussing. He's cussing. I mean, we're yelling. And I'd get off the phone and I'd come home and I'd tell my husband, I'm probably not going to have a job tomorrow. But that never happened. I finally got the call and he said, I'll get you in if. It was still a negotiation, but it was a game that had to be played. And I don't know, tenacity, luck, I don't know what you want to call it, Teddy, but I got it. And that's why I'm here able to talk to you about it today. And it's one of my passions about helping women navigate the sea of UPS corporate, union, Teamster union, because it's not always cut and dry, black and white, as the book says it should be when it comes to some of us.
I'd love to hear more about that. It sounds like you aren't just fighting for your own job. You know, you started that Facebook page you mentioned. Can you talk a bit about what you've done beyond yourself, what you've done to help other people, and what you've heard from other people? Have you heard of similar cases? What other things are you hearing?
So as soon as I got into the feeder department, I got in October. I can't remember the year at this point. I'm not good at years like that, like people are, but I got in October, and by December, January, somewhere in there, I had been asked to become a union steward with the current team that was in the feeder department at that time. And the only reason why it sounded like, I looked to be a good union steward, it was because of all the fighting I had already done. I had to memorize our contract, and I wasn't afraid to argue and fight with the union hall. I wasn't afraid to argue and fight with the company. So when I came over into feeders and they offered that to me, I said yes. And one of the first things I started doing was comparing apples to apples, my husband and our insurance packages, and, you know, what stock do I have? What does he have? What coverage do I have? And I found out that I had a supplemental policy that he did not have. And I'm talking $1 million coverage that UPSers that we were able to get. I'm talking cents on the dollar is what it cost us. And he didn't have it. Well, as I started digging into that, most of the feeder drivers did not have this coverage because they were more senior drivers. Well, seniority is seniority. There's no way a junior driver should have more than a senior driver. And when I started digging into that and found out what they didn't know, it literally hurt my heart. I don't like when people don't know something, because what you don't know can hurt you. So I filed a group grievance. We got it all worked out. We had to fight for about 1.5 years to get everybody who wanted that insurance to get it. And at the same time, as a union steward, I realized we have a lot of women that we don't have a voice, we don't have an ear, we don't have a space. So I said, I'm going to try to create a Facebook page for the women at my building. Well, I did that with the feeder department. And then I said, you know what? This isn't just about feeders. This is bigger. Women are the minority at UPS. So I had this crazy idea. Let me open it up to all UPS women. And Teddy, that's union and non-union women. We share this page together. And that's where a whole new family was born. Corporate women, management, supervisors, union women. We are all on this page, and you see them talking, sharing, helping, sending phone numbers. Hey, I can't talk about that here, but private message me. I can get you some answers. It took off on its own to where I had to get other women to help me administer the page. I couldn't keep up with just approving the women, because we make sure you're a UPSer one way or another before we'll let you on the page. And we definitely, it sounds backwards, but we keep men off. But it's because the women, we talk about our UPS women issues, that if we were to ask, hey, what's the best breast pump that we can use while we're out here on the road? What have you guys been doing to keep the milk cold? We can't ask that in UPS feeders worldwide with all those men. You can only imagine the jokes that would go if we were asked that question over there. But in our page, we talk about what we need. And that's where I learned so much about, I'm not the only woman that's had to be shorted or fight, or the sad part is women are afraid to fight because many of them are the sole provider for their household. so they can't risk losing their job to get what they deserve. So just trying to educate the women. I always try to tell them, educate yourself to make yourself equal. What you don't know can hurt you. So I tell them, get your contracts, read your information, get on a UPS site, read what corporate wants to have for you, put it all together with the union contract, and then go demand it. And we just kind of walk each other through it, Teddy, and talk to each other. Some women just will never be as tenacious as someone like me and put up that kind of fight for herself. But sometimes those that can't, we just kind of try to give them support, encouragement the best way we can. But that's what the page is for, and that's how I call myself trying to help other people within UPS, just learning how to navigate and how to play the game.
Last time we spoke, you mentioned also starting a women's caucus at your local. I know that those exist at different locals and perhaps at the international level as well. Has there been any progress on that? I'm curious, and also how some of these issues that women specifically face, have you tried, have other people tried to fold that into the current contract campaign that's happening at UPS right now?
I don't know. We haven't had to focus on it as far as the contract campaign, but I am proud to say that we will be having, I just got the flyer this week from my secretary treasurer of my local, and it's sisters, come and join us for our inaugural women's meeting. It'll be Saturday, May 20th at 2 p.m. at our union hall. We are ecstatic to be announcing that and sharing that with sisters, and hoping we can pack the house and start some education and find out what their needs are on a local level and start giving them education to help themselves.
So what is on the horizon? That's clearly on the horizon, but I'm curious, what do you want to achieve? What are the things that you want out of UPS, out of the union, specifically for women at UPS, but beyond that, just as an organizer yourself?
So I would think for my union, because it's not just UPSers at my union, my union hall, obviously. One, I want to know other Teamster women here locally in Indiana. I want to know who they are. I want to know what they do. I'm heavy UPS knowledgeable, but I've learned there are sisters that drive dump trucks. There are sisters we have that are airline stewardess. There are sisters we have that are daycare providers. We're everywhere in Indianapolis, and I don't know who they are. And that's one thing that our new leadership has taken the bull by the horn. We were so segregated before, each company to its own. It's like they didn't want us to talk to each other because they didn't want one to know what the other had. It might create too much pencil work for them, so they kept us separate. For my local, I want to know who my Teamster sisters are, and I want to get to know them on a personal level. As far as UPS is concerned, that is a bigger piece to bite off. I would like to see my Facebook group grow. I think I asked a corporate lady before, I think she said we were estimate about 22,000 women in the UPS system. I'm sure there's probably more than that. We don't know if that's exactly accurate. That was her guesstimate at that time. I'd love to see that page get to a 22,000. And then I'd like to see, just like Teamsters does a Teamster Women's Convention, I'd love to see, it sounds selfish because they can't do a men's convention because it probably shut down the company, but something that was initiated by UPS for the hub and the drivers, something for women that we could grab onto that was from UPS that would bring us together, educate us specifically on UPS needs. I would love to see more career paths laid out for the women, how to do that from UPS, and just be a little more hands-on with the women, knowing that they're the minority group within this company. And then I think the last piece of your question, Teddy, was as an organizer just for women, what would I like to see? I'm a mother of 4 daughters, and I was a widow early on raising my children. And the thing that I always focused on with my daughters was education. And I'm not talking just in the books. I always said if they were old enough to reach it, they were old enough to learn how to use it. I don't like a woman not knowing. It is the best way for us to be taken advantage of and have to depend on someone else and be subjected to what they want us to do to get what we need. I don't believe in that, Teddy. Not at all. So I believe in teaching women and putting information in their hands to empower them to handle their own life how they need to do it. Now, I'm a married woman and I'm happily married, but I know the struggle of being a widow. I know the struggle of being a single young mom. What you don't know will have you behind, and I don't like women being in that predicament.
Is there anything else that you think is important to get across to people who might be listening that are either UPSers, non-UPSers, about the issues we were just discussing, or about also the contract campaign going on right now?
It's funny you asked that, because that definitely goes, more generally speaking, because I use that word minority carefully, but I use it because it's a word people identify with. But the one thing that I like to try to encourage people to do, we may consider ourselves a minority because we're the lower number. But what I don't like people to do is use that as an excuse to not fight, to not educate. It's too easy to say, oh, they're going to treat me that way because I'm this or because I'm that. I'm a minority. They're not going to pay any attention. It's very easy to sit back and just accept that type of plight. But you can describe yourself or check that box so that you are aware, but don't own it as this is all I am. And that's why I say, Teddy, educate yourself so you can be equal. Education is what will make you equal. If you don't know, you can't speak. So I want everybody, I don't care if you're a woman, I don't care if you're African American, I don't care your sexual background. Those boxes they make us check to say what we are, we fit ourselves into those boxes, and then we stop working and we stop fighting. I don't want people to do that. What you want, you have a right to have, and you have a right to have a seat at the table. And I tell people, educate yourself so you can go there and demand it.
Michelle Espinoza, thank you for joining me on the Upsurge.
Thank you.
You just listened to an exclusive bonus episode of The Upsurge. The Upsurge is produced in partnership with In These Times and the Real News Network. Both are nonprofit media organizations that cover the labor movement closely. Check them out at inthesetimes.com and therealnews.com, where you can also find an archive of all our past episodes. If you're listening but you are not yet a supporter of our Patreon, please, if you like the show, if you want to keep it going, head over to patreon.com/upsurgepod and become a patron today. The link is in the description. We are trying to get to 200 monthly supporters by July to make the podcast sustainable, and we are quite a ways away. So please help us help you and become a patron. If you haven't already, follow us on Twitter at UpsurgePod, Facebook, The Upsurge, and you can also find all our full episodes now on our YouTube channel, The Upsurge. Go spread it far and wide, leave us ratings, likes, comments, all the good stuff. Thank you so much to our patrons who keep the show going. The podcast was edited by myself. It was produced by NYGP and Ruby Walsh. Music is by Casey Gallagher. The cover art was done by Devlin, Claro, Resetar. I'm Teddy Ostrow. Thanks for listening, and catch you next time.